and welcome to another night of Liberty Readers, in which we are reading Book 4 in the Chronicles of Narnia, called Prince Caspian. And so far, we've re-encountered our old friends, Edmund, Lucy, Susan, and Peter, and they have been drawn back into Narnia for another adventure. And this time it seems like they're quite a bit of time away from when they were first there. And you remember when they were first there, they became kings and queens of Narnia. But it seems now that they're back, a lot has changed and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so they've encountered a dwarf who's telling them the tale of Prince Caspian, a current upcoming ruler in where they are, and he seems to have a love for the old things of Narnia. But his uncle is not so much pleased with old Narnia, and in fact isn't even from Narnia. They're Telmarines. So today we got to find out more about Prince Caspian and see how Edmund, Lucy, Susan, and Peter can help get things back on track to the way they should be in Narnia. So without further ado, let's begin reading. Chapter 5, Caspian's Adventure in the Mountains. After this, Caspian and his tutor had many more secret conversations on the top of the great tower, and at each conversation, Caspian learned more about old Narnia, so that thinking and dreaming about the old days and longing that they might come back filled nearly all his spare hours. But of course, he had not many hours to spare, for now his education was beginning in earnest. He learned sword fighting and riding, swimming and diving, how to shoot with the bow and play on the recorder and the theorbo, how to hunt the stag and cut him up when he was dead. Besides cosmography, rhetoric, heraldry, versification, and of course history, with a little law, physic, alchemy, and astronomy. Of magic he learned only the theory, for Dr. Cornelius said that the practical part was not proper study for princes. And I myself, he added, am only a very imperfect magician, and can do only the smallest experiments. Of navigation, which is a noble and heroical art, said the doctor, he was taught nothing, because King Miraz disapproved of ships and the sea. He also learned a great deal by using his own eyes and ears. As a little boy, he had often wondered why he disliked his aunt, Queen Pruna Prismia. He now saw that it was because she disliked him. He also began to see that Narnia was an unhappy country. The taxes were high and the laws were stern, and Miraz was a cruel man. After some years, there came a time when the queen seemed to be ill, and there was a great deal of bustle and pother about her in the castle, and the doctors came, and the courtiers whispered. This was in early summertime, and one night, while all this fuss was going on, Caspian was unexpectedly wakened by Dr. Cornelius after he had been only a few hours in bed. "Are we going to do a little astronomy, Doctor?" said Caspian. "Hush," said the doctor. "Trust me and do exactly as I tell you. Put on all your clothes. You have a long journey before you." Caspian was very surprised, but he had learned to have confidence in his tutor and began doing what he was told at once. When he was dressed, the doctor said, "I have a wallet for you. We must go into the next room and fill it with victuals from your highness's supper table." "My gentlemen in waiting will be there," said Caspian. "They are fast asleep and will not wake," said the doctor. "I am a very minor magician, but I can at least contrive a charmed sleep." They went into the antechamber, and there, sure enough, the two gentlemen in waiting were sprawling on chairs and snoring hard. Dr. Cornelius quickly cut up the remains of a cold chicken and some slices of venison and put them, with bread and an apple or so, and a little flask of good wine into the wallet, which he then gave to Caspian. It fitted on by a strap over Caspian's shoulder like a satchel you would use for taking books to school. "Have you your sword?" said the doctor. "Yes," said Caspian. Then put on this mantle over all to hide the sword and the wallet. That's right. And now we must go to the great tower and talk." When they had reached the top of the tower, it was a cloudy night, not at all like the night when they had seen the conjunction of Tarva and Alambal. Dr. Cornelius said, "Dear Prince, you must leave this castle at once and go to seek your fortune in the wide world. Your life is in danger here." "Why?" asked Caspian. "Because you are the true king of Narnia, Caspian the 10th, the true son and heir of Caspian the 9th. Long live to your majesty." And suddenly, to Caspian's great surprise, the little man dropped down on one knee and kissed his hand. "What does it all mean? I don't understand," said Caspian. "I wonder you have never asked me before," said the doctor. "Why, being the son of the King Caspian, you are not King Caspian yourself. Everyone except your majesty knows that Miraz is a usurper. When he began to rule, he did not even pretend to be king. He called himself Lord Protector. But when your royal mother died, the good queen and the only Telmarine who was ever kind to me, and then, one by one, all the great lords who had known your father died or disappeared. Not by accident either. Miraz weeded them out. Belisar and Uvelius were shot with arrows on a hunting party. By chance, it was pretended. All the great house of Passerides he sent to fight giants on the northern frontier till one by one they fell. Arlian and Iramon and a dozen more he executed for treason on a false charge. The two brothers of Beaver's Dam he shut up as madmen, and finally he persuaded the 7 noble lords, who alone among all the Talmarines did not fear the sea, to sail away and look for new lands beyond the Eastern Ocean, and, as he intended, they never came back. And when there was no one left who could speak a word for you, then his flatterers, as he instructed them, begged him to become king. And, of course, he did." "Do you mean he now wants to kill me too?" said Caspian. "That is almost certain," said the Dr. Cornelius. "But why now?" said Caspian. "I mean, why didn't he do it long ago if he wanted to? And what harm have I done him?" "He has changed his mind about you because of something that happened only 2 hours ago. The Queen had a son." "I don't see what that has got to do with it," said Caspian. "Don't see!" exclaimed the doctor. "Have all my lessons in history and politics taught you no more than that? Listen. As long as he had no children of his own, he was willing enough that you should be king after he died. He may not have cared much about you, but he would rather you should have the throne than a stranger. Now that he has a son of his own, he will want his own son to be the next king. You are in the way. He will clear you out of the way." "Is he really as bad as that?" said Caspian. "Would he really murder me?" "He murdered your father," said Dr. Cornelius. Caspian felt very queer and said nothing. "I can tell you the whole story," said to the doctor, "but not now. There is no time. You must fly at once." "You'll come with me?" said Caspian. "I dare not," said the doctor. "It would make your danger greater. 2 are more easily trapped than 1. Dear Prince, dear King Caspian, you must be brave." You must go alone and at once. Try to get across the southern border to the court of the King Nain of Archenland. He will be good to you." "Shall I never see you again?" said Caspian in a quavering voice. "I hope so, dear king," said the doctor. "What friend have I in the whole wide world except your majesty? And I have a little magic, but in the meantime, speed is everything. Here are 2 gifts before you go. This is a little purse of gold. Alas, all the treasure in this castle should be your own by rights. And here is something far better." He put in Caspian's hand something which he could hardly see, but which he knew by the feel to be a horn. "That," said Dr. Cornelius, "is the greatest and most sacred treasure of Narnia. Many terrors I endured, many spells did I utter to find it when I was still young. It is the magic horn of Queen Susan herself, which she left behind her when she vanished from Narnia at the end of the Golden Age. It is said that whoever blows it shall have strange help. No one can say how strange. It may have the power to call Queen Lucy and King Edmund and Queen Susan and the High King Peter back from the past, and they will set all to rights. It may be that it will call upon Aslan himself. Take it, King Caspian, but do not use it except at your greatest need. And now, haste, haste, haste!" The little door at the very bottom of the tower, the door into the garden, is unlocked. There we must part. "Can I get my horse, Destrier?" said Caspian. "He's already saddled and waiting for you just at the corner of the orchard." During the long climb down the winding staircase, Cornelius whispered many more words of direction and advice. Caspian's heart was sinking, but he tried to take it all in. Then came the fresh air in the garden, a fervent handclasp with the doctor, a run across the lawn, a welcoming whinny from Destrier, and so King Caspian X left the castle of his fathers. Looking back, he saw fireworks going up to celebrate the birth of the new prince. All night he strode southward, choosing by ways and bridle paths through the woods as long as he was in country that he knew. But afterward he kept to the high road. Destrier was as excited as his master at this unusual journey. And Caspian, though tears had come into his eyes at saying goodbye to Dr. Cornelius, felt brave and, in a way, happy to think that he was King Caspian riding to seek adventures with his sword on his left hip and Queen Susan's magic horn on his right. But when day came, with a sprinkle of rain, and he looked about him and saw on every side unknown woods, wild heaths, and blue mountains, he thought how large and strange the world was, and felt frightened and small. As soon as it was full daylight, he left the road and found an open grassy place amid a wood where he could rest. He took off Destrier's bridle and let him graze, ate some cold chicken, and drank a little wine, and presently fell asleep. It was late afternoon when he awoke. He ate a morsel and continued his journey still southward by many unfrequented lanes. He was now in a land of hills, going up and down, but always more up than down. From every ridge he could see the mountains growing bigger and blacker ahead. As the evening closed in, he was riding their lower slopes. The wind rose. Soon rain fell in torrents. Destrier became uneasy, and there was thunder in the air. And now they had entered a dark and seemingly endless pine forest, and all the stories Caspian had ever heard of trees being unfriendly to men crowded in his mind. He remembered that he was, after all, a Telmarine, one of the race who cut down the trees wherever they could, and were at war with all wild things. And though he himself might be unlike other Telmarines, the trees could not be expected to know this. Nor did they. The wind became a tempest, the woods roared and creaked all around them. There came a crash. A tree fell right across the road just behind him. "Quick, Destrier, quick!" said Caspian, patting his horse's neck. But he was trembling himself and knew that he had escaped death by an inch. Lightning flashed, and a great crack of thunder seemed to break the sky in two, just overhead. Destrier bolted in good earnest. Caspian was a good rider, but he had not the strength to hold him back. He kept his seat, but he knew that his life hung by a thread during the wild career that followed. Tree after tree rose up before him in the dusk and was only just avoided. Then, almost too suddenly to hurt, and yet it did hurt him too, something struck Caspian on the forehead, and he knew no more. When he came to himself, he was lying in a firelit place, with bruised limbs and a bad headache. Low voices were speaking close at hand. "And now," said one, "before it wakes up, we must decide what to do with it." "Kill it," said another. "We can't let it live. It would betray us." "We ought to have killed it at once, or else let it alone," said a third voice. "We can't kill it now. Not after we've taken it in and bandaged its head and all. It would be murdering a guest." "Gentlemen," said Caspian in a feeble voice, "whatever you do to me, I hope you will be kind to my poor horse." "Your horse had taken flight long before we found you," said the first voice, a curiously husky, earthy voice, as Caspian now noticed. "Now don't let it talk you round with its pretty words," said the second voice. "I still say—" "Horns and halibuts!" exclaimed the third voice. "Of course we're not going to murder it. For shame, Knickerbrick. What do you say, Truffle Hunter? What shall we do with it?" "I shall give it a drink," said the first voice, presumably Truffle Hunter's. A dark shape approached the bed. Caspian felt an arm slipped gently under his shoulders, if it was exactly an arm. The shape was somehow seemed wrong. The face that bent toward him seemed wrong too. He got the impression that it was very hairy and very long-nosed, and there were odd white patches on each side of it. "It's a mask of some sort," thought Caspian. "Or perhaps I'm in a fever and imagining it all." A cupful of something sweet and hot was set to his lips, and he drank. At that moment, one of the others poked the fire. A blaze sprang up, and Caspian almost screamed with the shock as the sudden light revealed the face that was looking into his own. It was not a man's face, but a badger's, though larger and friendlier and more intelligent than the face of any badger he had seen before. And it had certainly been talking. He saw, too, that he was on a bed of heather in a cave. By the fire sat two little bearded men, so much wilder and shorter and hairier and thicker than Dr. Cornelius that he knew them at once for real dwarfs, ancient dwarfs, with not a drop of human blood in their veins. And Caspian knew that he had found the old Narnians at last. Then his head began to swim again. In the next few days he learned to know them by names. The badger was called Truffle Hunter, and he was the oldest and kindest of the three. The dwarf who had wanted to kill Caspian was a sour black dwarf. That is, his hair and beard were black and thick and hard like horsehair. His name was Knickerbrick. The other dwarf was a red dwarf with hair rather like a fox's, and he was called Trumpkin. "And now," said Knickerbrick on the first evening when Caspian was well enough to sit up and talk, "we still have to decide what to do with this human. You two think you've done it a great kindness by not letting me kill it, but I suppose the upshot is we have to keep it a prisoner for life. I'm certainly not going to let it go alive, to go back to its own kind and betray us all." "Bulbs and bolsters, Knickerbrick," said Trumpkin. "Why need you talk so unhandsomely? It isn't the creature's fault that it bashed its head against a tree outside our hole. And I don't think it looks like a traitor." "I say," said Caspian, "you haven't yet found out whether I want to go back. I don't. I want to stay with you, if you'll let me. I've been looking for people like you all my life." "That's a likely story," growled Nickelbrick. "You're a Telmarine and a human, aren't you? Of course you want to go back to your own kind." "Well, even if I did, I couldn't," said Caspian. "I was flying for my life when I had my accident. The king wants to kill me. If you'd killed me, you'd have done the very thing to please him." "Well, now," said Trufflehunter, "you don't say." "Eh?" said Trumpkin. "What's that? What have you been doing, human, to fall foul of Miraz at your age?" "He's my uncle," began Caspian, when Nickelbrick jumped up with a hand on his dagger. "There you are," he cried, "not only a Telmarine, but close kin and heir to our greatest enemy. Are you still mad enough to let this creature live?" He would have stabbed Caspian then and there, if the Badger and Trumpkin had not gotten in the way and forced him back to his seat and held him down. "Now, once and for all, Nickelbrick," said Trumpkin, "will you contain yourself, or must Trufflehunter and I sit on your head?" Nickelbrick sulkily promised to behave, and the other two asked Caspian to tell his whole story. When he had done so, there was a moment's silence. "This is the queerest thing I've ever heard," said Trumpkin. "I don't like it," said Nickelbrick. "I didn't know there were stories about us still told among the humans. The less they know about us, the better. That old nurse now, she'd better have held her tongue. And it's all mixed up with that tutor, a renegade dwarf. I hate him. I hate him worse than the humans. You mark my words, no goodwill will come of it." "Don't you go talking about things you don't understand, Nickelbrick," said Trufflehunter. "You dwarfs are as forgetful and changeable as the humans themselves. I'm a beast, I am, and a badger's what's more. We don't change. We hold on. I say great good will come of it. This is the true king of Narnia we've got here. A true king, coming back to true Narnia. And we beasts remember, even if dwarfs forget, that Narnia was never right except when a son of Adam was king." "Whistles and whirligigs, Trufflehunter," said Trumpkin. "You don't mean you want to give the country to humans?" I never said nothing about that," answered the Badger. "It's not men's country, who should know better than me. But it's a country for a man to be king of. We Badgers have long enough memories to know that. Why, bless us all, wasn't the High King Peter a man?" "You still believe those old stories," said Trumpkin. "I tell you we don't change, we beasts," said Trufflehunter. "We don't forget. I believe in the High King Peter and the rest that reigned at Cair Paravel as firmly as I believe in Aslan himself." "As firmly as that, I dare say," said Trumpkin. "But who believes in Aslan nowadays?" "I do," said Caspian. "And if I hadn't believed in him before, I would now. Back there among the humans, the people who laughed at Aslan would have laughed at stories about talking beasts and dwarves. Sometimes I did wonder if there's really such a person as Aslan. But when sometimes I wondered if there are really people like you, yet there you are." "That's right," said Trufflehunter. "You're right, King Caspian, and as long as you will be true to old Narnia, you shall be my king, whatever they say. Long life to your majesty." "You make me sick, Badger," growled Nickelbrick. "The High King Peter and the rest may have been men, But they were a different sort of men. This is one of the cursed Telmarines. He has hunted beasts for sport. Haven't you now? He added, rounding suddenly on Caspian. Well, to tell you the truth, I have, said Caspian, but they weren't talking beasts. It's all the same thing, said Knickerbrick. No, said Truffle Hunter. You know it isn't. You know very well that the beasts in Narnia nowadays are different and are no more than the poor, dumb, witless creatures you'd find in Calormen or Telmar. They're smaller, too. They're far more different from us than the half-dwarfs are from you. There was a great deal more talk, but it all ended with agreement that Caspian should stay, and even the promise that, as soon as he was able to go out, he should be taken to see what Trumpkin called the others. For apparently in these wild parts, all sorts of creatures from the old days of Narnia still lived on in hiding. Chapter 6. The People That Lived in Hiding. Now began the happiest times that Caspian had ever known. On a fine summer morning, when the dew lay on the grass, he set off with the badger and the two dwarfs up the forest to the high saddle in the mountains, and down unto their sunny southern slopes, where one looked across the green wolds of Archenland. We will go first to see the three bulgy bears, said Trumpkin. They came in a glade to an old hollow oak tree covered with moss, and Truffle Hunter tapped with his paw 3 times on the trunk, and there was no answer. Then he tapped again, and a woolly sort of voice from inside said, "Go away! It's not my time to get up yet." But when he tapped the 3rd time, there was a noise like a small earthquake from inside, and a sort of door opened, and out came 3 brown bears, very bulgy indeed, and blinking their little eyes. And when everything had been explained to them, which took a long time because they were so sleepy, they said, just as Truffle Hunter had said, that a son of Adam ought to be king of Narnia, and all kissed Caspian. Very wet, snuffly kisses they were, and offered him some honey. Caspian did not really want honey without bread at that time in the morning, but he thought it polite to accept. It took him a long time afterwards to get unsticky. After that, they went on till they came among tall beech trees, and Truffle Hunter cried out, "Pattertwig! Pattertwig! Pattertwig!" And almost at once, bounding down from the branch to branch till he was just above their heads, came the most magnificent red squirrel that Caspian had ever seen. He was far bigger than the ordinary dumb squirrels, which he had sometimes seen in the castle gardens. Indeed, he was nearly the size of a terrier, and the moment you looked in his face, you saw that he could talk. Indeed, the difficulty was to get him to stop talking, for, like all squirrels, he was a chatterer. He welcomed Caspian at once and asked if he would like a nut, and Caspian said thanks, he would. But as Pattertwig went up the bounding way to fetch it, Truffle Hunter whispered in Caspian's ear, "Don't look. Look the other way. It's very bad manners among squirrels to watch anyone going to a store or to look as if you wanted to know where it was." Then Pattertwig came back with the nut and asked Caspian, and Caspian ate it, and after Pattertwig asked if he could take any messages to other friends. "For I can go nearly everywhere without setting foot to ground," he said. Truffle Hunter and the dwarfs thought this was a very good idea, and gave Pattertwig messages to all sorts of people with queer names, telling them all to come to a feast and council on Dancing Lawn at midnight, 3 nights ahead. "And you better tell the 3 Bulgies, too," asked Trumpkin. "We forgot to mention it to them." Their next visit was to the 7 brothers of Shuddering Wood. Trumpkin led the way back to the saddle and down eastward on the northern slope of the mountains till they came to a very solemn place among rocks and fir trees. They went very quietly and presently Caspian could feel the ground shake under his feet as if someone were hammering down below. Trumpkin went to a flat stone about the size of the top of the water butt and stamped on it with his foot. After a long pause, it was moved away by someone or something underneath, and there was a dark, round hole with a good deal of heat and steam coming out of it. In the middle of the hole, the head of a dwarf, very much like Trumpkin himself. There was a long talk, and the dwarf seemed more suspicious than the squirrel or the bulgy bears had been, but in the end the whole party were invited to come down. Caspian found himself descending on a dark stairway into the earth, but when he came to the bottom, he saw firelight. It was the light of a furnace. The whole place was a smithy. A subterranean steam ran past on one side of it. 2 dwarfs were at the bellows. Another was holding a piece of red-hot metal on the anvil with a pair of tongues. A 4th was hammering it, and 2, wiping their horny little hands on a greasy cloth, were coming forward to meet the visitors. It took some time to satisfy them that Caspian was a friend and not an enemy. But when they did, they all cried, "Long live the king!" And their gifts were noble. Mail shirts and helmets and swords for Caspian and Trumpkin and Knickerbrick. The badger could have had the same if he had liked, but he said he was a beast. He was, and if his claws and teeth could not keep his skin whole, it wasn't worth keeping. The workmanship of the arms was far finer than any Caspian had ever seen, and he gladly accepted the dwarf-made sword instead of his own, which looked, in comparison, as feeble as a toy and as clumsy as a stick. The 7 brothers, who were all red dwarfs, promised to come to the feast at Dancing Lawn. A little further on, in a dry, rocky ravine, they reached the cave of the 5 black dwarfs. They looked suspiciously at Caspian, but in the end the oldest of them said, "If he is against Miraz, we'll have him for king." And the next oldest said, "Shall we go farther up for you, up to the crags? There's an ogre or 2 and a hag that we could introduce to you 2 up there." "Certainly not," said Caspian. "I should think not indeed," said the truffle hunter. "We want none of that sort on our side." Knickerbrick disagreed with this, but Trumpkin and the badger overruled him. It gave Caspian a shock to realize that the horrible creatures out of the old stories, as well as the nice ones, had some descendants in Narnia still. "We should not have Aslan for a friend if we brought in that rabble," said Truffle Hunter as they came away from the cave with the black dwarfs. "Oh, Aslan," said Trumpkin cheerily but contemptuously. "What matters much more is that you wouldn't have me." "Do you believe in Aslan?" asked Caspian to Knickerbrick. "I'll believe in anyone or anything," said Knickerbrick, "that'll batter these cursed Telmarine barbarians to pieces, or drive them out of Narnia. Anyone or anything. Aslan or the White Witch. Do you understand?" "Silence, silence," said Truffle Hunter. "You do not know what you are saying. She was the worst enemy than Miraz and all his race." "Not to the dwarves she wasn't," said Knickerbrick. Their next visit was a pleasanter one. As they came lower down, the mountains opened out into a great glen or wooded gorge with a swift river running at the bottom. The open places near the river's edge were a mass of foxgloves and wild roses, and the air was buzzing with bees. Here Truffle Hunter called again, "Glenstorm, Glenstorm!" And after a pause, Caspian heard the sound of hoofs. It grew louder till the valley trembled, and at last, breaking and trampling the thickets, there came in sight the noblest creatures that Caspian had yet seen. The great centaur Glenstorm and his 3 sons. His flanks were glossy chestnut, and the beard that covered his broad chest was golden red. He was a prophet and a stargazer and knew what they had come about. "Long live the king!" he cried. "I and my sons are ready for war. When is the battle to be joined?" Up till now, neither Caspian nor the others had really been thinking of a war. They had some vague idea, perhaps, of an occasional raid on some human farmstead or attacking a party of hunters if it ventured too far into these southern wilds. But in the main, they had only thought of living to themselves in the woods and caves and building up an attempt at old Narnia in hiding. As soon as Glindstorm had spoken, everyone felt much more serious. "Do you mean a real war to drive Miraz out of Narnia?" asked Caspian. "What else?" said the centaur. "Why else does your majesty go clad in mail and girt with sword?" "Is it possible, Glindstorm?" said the badger. "The time is ripe," said Glindstorm. "I watch the skies, badger, for it is mine to watch, as it is yours to remember. Tarva and Alambil have met in the halls of the high heaven, and on earth a son of Adam has once more arisen to rule and name the creatures. The hour has struck. Our council at the dancing lawn must be a council of war." He spoke in such a voice that neither Caspian nor the others hesitated for a moment. It now seemed to them quite possible that they might win a war, and quite certain that they must wage one. As it was now past the middle of the day, they rested with the centaurs and ate such food as the centaurs provided. Cakes of oatmeal and apples and herbs and wine and cheese. The next place they were to visit was quite near at hand, but they had to go a long way around in order to avoid a region in which men lived. It was well into the afternoon before they found themselves in level fields, warm between hedgerows. There Truffle Hunter called at the mouth of a little hole in a green bank, and out popped the last thing Caspian expected: a talking mouse. He was, of course, bigger than a common mouse, well over a foot high when he stood on his hind legs, and with ears nearly as long as, though broader than, a rabbit's. His name was Reepicheep, and he was a gay and martial mouse. He wore a tiny little rapier at his side and twirled his long whiskers as if they were a mustache. "There are 12 of us, sire," he said with a dashing and graceful bow. "And I place that all the resources of my people unreservedly at your majesty's disposal." Caspian tried hard, and unsuccessfully, not to laugh, but he couldn't help thinking that Reepicheep and all his people could very easily be put in washing basket and carried home on one's back. It would take too long to mention all the creatures whom Caspian met that day. Clodsley Shovel the Mole, the 3 hard biters who were badgers like Truffle Hunter, Camilo the Hare, and Hogglestock the Hedgehog. They rested at last beside a well at the edge of the wide and level circle of grass, bordered with tall elms which now threw long shadows across it. For the sun was setting, the daisies closing, and the rooks flying home to bed. Here they supped on food they had brought with them, and Trumpkin lit his pipe. Knickerbrick was not a smoker. "Now," said the badger, "if only we could wake the spirits of these trees in this well, we should have done a good day's work." "Can't we?" said Caspian. "No," said the Truffle Hunter. "We have no power over them. Since the humans came into this land, felling trees and defiling streams, the dryads and the naiads have sunk into a deep sleep. Who knows if ever they will stir again, and that is a great loss to our side. The Telmarines are horribly afraid of the woods, and once the trees moved in anger, our enemies would go mad with fright and be chased out of Narnia as quick as their legs could carry them." What imaginations you animals said Trumpkin, who didn't believe in such things. But why stop at trees and waters? Wouldn't it be even nicer if the stones started throwing themselves at old Morass? The badger only grunted at this, and after that there was such a silence that Caspian had nearly dropped off to sleep when he thought he heard a faint musical sound from the depth of the woods at his back. Then he thought it was only a dream and turned over again, but as soon as his ear touched the ground he felt, or heard, it was hard to tell which, a faint beating or drumming. He raised his head. The beating noise at once became fainter, but the music returned clearer this time. It was like flutes. He saw that Truffle Hunter was sitting up, staring into the wood. The moon was bright. Caspian had been asleep longer than he thought. Nearer and nearer came the music, a tune wild and yet dreamy, and the noise of many light feet, till at last, out of the wood into the moonlight, came dancing shapes such as Caspian had been thinking of all his life. They were not much taller than dwarfs, but far slighter and more graceful. Their curly heads had little horns. The upper part of their bodies gleamed naked in the pale light, but their legs and feet were those of goats. "Fawns!" cried Caspian, jumping up. And in a moment they were all round him. It took next to no time to explain the whole situation to them, and they accepted Caspian at once. Before he knew what he was doing, he found himself joining in the dance. Trumpkin, with heavier and jerkier movements, did likewise, and even Truffle Hunter hopped and lumbered about as best he could. Only Knickerbrick stayed where he was, looking on in silence. The fawns footed it all round Caspian to their reedy pipes. Their strange faces, which seemed mournful and merry all at once, looked into his. Dozens of fawns, Mintius, and Obentinus, and Dumbness, Volans, Voltinus, Giberus, Niminus, Nauseous, and Oscans. Pattertwig had sent them all. When Caspian awoke the next morning, he could hardly believe that it had not all been a dream, but the grass was covered with little cloven hoof marks. And we will stop there for today. So, sounds pretty interesting. Caspian was cast out of his home. He had to run away because his uncle was likely going to murder him. But he's found a new set of friends, and this is great news because he's been looking for them his whole life, the old Narnians. So, looks like they're on the verge of waging some kind of war. So let's see what happens with that, and let's see if he ever meets Lucy and Susan and Peter and Edmund. Kind of interesting what's going to happen. So look forward to chatting with you again next week.